Hello and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She's the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute, and today is May 21st, 2025. If you have questions and comments for Helga, you can send them to us at questions@schillerinstitute.org or post them on the chat page. Now, I want to start by just calling people's attention to an extremely important conference sponsored by the Schiller Institute coming up this weekend. Saturday and Sunday. It's never been more necessary given events going on in the world, some potential moves, very important moves toward peace, but some very nasty operations being run, not just against peace, but against development, that raises the whole question of will mankind demonstrate the moral fitness to survive? There's no one better to talk about that than Helga. And so Helga, given this context of a confluence of events and the conference coming up, where do you think things stand right now?
Well, first of all, I'm happy that you are my dialogue partner because Professor Theodor Postol, who was supposed to be on today with me, had a very short-term, unforeseeable thing coming up. So he, will be with us next week. So please, if you are looking for Professor Postol, be patient. Next week he will be here. So the conference naturally takes place at a point where, the strategic situation has never been so, turbulent. Seismic changes are taking place. We have a situation where it is clear that between the United States and Russia, there is a very serious attempt to bring the Ukraine war to an end. There was the very important discussion by phone between President Putin and President Trump. So these two largest nuclear powers are going in the direction of ending the Ukraine war, which did have the potential, and hopefully soon no longer has the potential to become a global nuclear war. So one would think that people are happy about that, but you have the Europeans and the Ukrainians in a so-called coalition of the willing, very strange name they choose there, since that refers to the coalition of the willing of the war against Saddam Hussein in 2003, which, as we now know, was based on lies. But they seem to be, trying to somehow prolong the conflict. So that's one thing. Then we have news, unconfirmed, but serious US officials are being quoted that they have all kinds of indications between human intelligence reports, observation of what the Israeli army is doing, that they have signs that Israel may prepare a war, a strike against the nuclear facilities in Iran, also at a point where it seems that the negotiations with the Trump administration could reach a peaceful settlement. So then we have an unbelievable, almost, an official end of democracy, it seems, whereby, elections in EU member countries are being run so often until the desired result is coming out, like in Romania. Then we have the 17th package of sanctions by the EU against Russia, which includes, unbelievably, basically taking de facto away the citizenship of two German journalists working in Russia, without legal recourse, by just implementing it based on an administrative ruling, depriving them de facto of any ability to have legal recourse. So these are all very, very unbelievable events. And it shows, that from most governments, at least in Europe, you cannot expect right now a constructive approach how to deal with the Ukraine situation, how to deal with the unbelievable genocide going on in Gaza, where the latest report was already more than a day ago, where the UN warned that 14,000 children are in an immediate dying phase if they don't get rescued in the next 48 hours. So of these 48 hours, already, more than a day has passed. So you can only imagine what is going on. So these developments make very clear that if you try to address all of these one by one only, you have to address them one by one, but that we need urgently to move in a completely new paradigm. And that's what the conference this coming weekend in the United States is all about. And I think this will be one of the most important historic interventions to try to put a completely different approach on the agenda, how we can get mankind to a more safe place. So you should absolutely tune in, register if you want to participate actively in the discussion, or at least look at it at YouTube. It will be co-streamed by several other channels. But, be focused on that. Go to the Schiller website and look at the tremendous speakers and the topics we have there. And I think your curiosity will be for sure increased.
Well, you just threw out a whole lot of things going on in the world, and let's unpack it a little bit by taking a couple of these individually. I want to start with what's happening in the Middle East, in Gaza, where as soon as Trump left, Netanyahu unleashed this Gideon's chariots operation to basically clean the Palestinians out of Gaza, to destroy the whole strip, destroy what's left of a livable place, and force the Palestinians to evacuate. Now, it's interesting, there's more commentary coming up finally about the genocide. One of the most interesting was the former deputy chief of staff of the Israeli IDF, Yair Golan, said, look, Israel is no longer a sane country. And yet there's still not enough being done to stop the genocide. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, there is a growing opposition inside Israel against Netanyahu. We had in the International Peace Coalition, which is a weekly Zoom meeting where, peace activists from all sides are participating in. We had a lot of Israelis who are for a settlement and peace of this situation. So there is a lot going on, but I think, in the coverage of the Western media, there was a very late and very, almost too late realization they could not any longer cover it up. And the governments of France, Great Britain, and Canada also put out a condemnation demanding immediate relief action. But, what is going on is, there are many voices in the global South saying that the reputation of the collective West has suffered an irreparable damage, because they started very late the coverage a couple of days ago, where they showed that people are desperately running around in a rubble field. Almost the entire Gaza is flattened. People saying, where should I go? I can't go south, I can't go west. The bombing continues. There's since 90 days no food, no medical things. As I said, a large number of the children are dying, and now the babies are in probably dying as we speak. It's also clear that the so-called private humanitarian aid organizations, which are now supposed to deliver food, it's ridiculous. Before this whole thing started, with the attack by Hamas on the 7th of October, 500 trucks per day of food, medicine, and so forth were coming into Gaza every single day. Now, after 90 days of total starvation, this new arrangement is that 5 trucks per day can come in. And the distribution points from 400 are being reduced to 4. So naturally, we had hunger riots repeatedly. If people are really fighting for their life, then naturally, when there is a little bit food in front of their eyes, they tend to, try to grab that, and violence happens, people get killed as a result of it. So it's unbelievable, and it is very clear that there is now a plan by the Israeli government to export the remaining Palestinians to 30, 40, 50 countries all over the world, distribute them. So it is de facto an ethnic cleansing. And I can only say that the inability of the governments of the world to act in time to prevent this, after the news is out for practically from the beginning, because Al Jazeera and other channels had it into transmitted it into the living room of millions and millions of people around the world. And now we are at the end phase of this, and I think this will leave a stain in the reputation of the world community, because we are all part of this, which I think will require an extraordinary act of something completely on a different plane to try to undo this incredible injustice which is taking place right now.
Well, there are a couple of questions that just came in quickly, and then I have one on the situation in the Middle East. It's a slightly longer statement, but first of all, someone writes, do you think the threat or the warnings of a threat to attack Iran is something Netanyahu would do to divert attention from the genocide, given that that's now getting more focus? Secondly, someone called attention to the fact that Netanyahu's explanation for allowing some shipments of food is to avoid charges of war crimes. So I wonder if you can comment on those two.
Well, I think it's very clear that Netanyahu tries any trick in the book to prolong the war, because when the war or the Gaza situation would end, then he would have to face incredible legal troubles, and I think that is a likely hypothesis, that he's trying to just divert attention and keep going as long as he possibly can. I mean, I can only say that the only conceivable plan would be, if the governments of the world, that includes the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, the United States in particular, if they would all work together and impose a peace. The United States could do it. If the United States, that's President Trump, would basically go one step beyond. I mean, he clearly has spoken already with Netanyahu to a certain extent, by not visiting Israel in his recent Mideast tour, for example. That has been read by many observers as a clear sign that he's distancing himself, because there are now voices, like the one you quoted, saying that Israel is in danger of becoming a pariah state, like it used to be South Africa under the conditions of apartheid. And that there is a growing concern for Trump, that may fall on his his reputation. So he could do that, but I can understand that Trump is maneuvering in a very, very difficult minefield in the United States himself, because he has on the one side the Z lobby, big funders of his campaign on the one side, then he has the neocons, he has the Democrats. So it's a very difficult situation, but that is no excuse, because the one country which could end it immediately is the United States. But given the complexities of the world, I think the best thing would be, if the United States would simply reach out to Russia and China and say, let's work together and combine the ending of the war with an economic development package like that we have proposed with the Oasis plan. And we from the Schiller Institute and the International Peace Coalition are still in a mobilization to put the Oasis plan on the table. Originally, it was supposed to target the conference on the two-state solution, called for by Macron and Saudi Arabia, which was supposed to take place beginning of June. Now it seems that it was postponed to the end of June, So we have more time to mobilize, but time is really of the essence, and every minute, every second counts.
Especially with the starvation reports we're getting from Gaza. Helga, just on the question of what could be done by people, I have a comment here. Someone said, statements like those of Macron and Starmer mean nothing. They're not going to do anything. And then Omar says, the US could stop this. That's the only one. Is there any leverage on that? And I'd like to bring up in this context, when you talk about international mobilization, you took an initiative along with Ray McGovern to send a letter to the Pope. I wonder if you could say something about that.
Yes, Pope Leo the 14th, just the news came today, did issue a very, very strong message, that the situation in Gaza needs immediate action. The humanitarian situation is becoming absolutely desperate. So I think that was a very important step in the right direction. But, we have written a letter to Pope Leo the 14th, an open letter, where we basically give full backing to his peace efforts. After all, the first words he spoke when he was, announcing that he was elected as a pope was calling for peace. So I think that he definitely, in that sense, follows the steps of Pope Francis. But, while, you have to have a Christian idea of agape and being a mediator, nevertheless, I think the people in the world need a moral compass, because if the governments are no longer following their own constitutions, they are not following international law, not the international Geneva Convention, UN Charter, other important bodies of law, the people can tend to become without an orientation. And that's why we issued this very, very strong appeal to the Pope that he should make an even stronger intervention. Because the Pope is, or the papacy is one of the few institutions in the world which is above man's law. It's based on natural law. It's based on the law of creation, and many religions look to the Pope, even if they are from a different denomination, as a moral leader. So if you agree that we need more action, then please sign this letter. We are right now in an international mobilization to collect signatures, and we want to issue the letter with signatures in a few days, maybe already at the weekend where we have the conference. So please distribute this letter in all networks you have, sign it, and join our mobilization, because I think if the Pope would speak even stronger, it would be absolutely necessary for the governments to follow his command.
And that letter is available on the schillerinstitute.com website. You can find it and read it, print it, circulate it, get signatures, and so on. Now, going back to the Trump-Putin discussion earlier this week, there are media reports trying to say that it was not successful, that there's a standoff between Europe and the United States. But here's a question that came in, which I think is important. Someone's asking why it is that the Schiller Institute doesn't support the idea of a ceasefire immediately. And could you explain the difference between what the Europeans are calling for and Zelensky for a ceasefire versus what Putin's calling for, which is addressing the underlying causes of the conflict?
Well, it's very clear that, the Russian position is that they have set clear goals for what they call the special military operation. That is the protection of the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. They have almost succeeded in that by, liberating the 4 oblasts and Crimea. They also demand that the root causes, which is not only the Russian speakers, but also that Ukraine must be neutral, that Ukraine cannot join NATO, and that no offensive weapon systems can be obviously, that is subsumed in the two earlier demands, but no offensive weapon systems can be stationed in Ukraine. And I don't think that there is anything in this world which will convince Putin and others in the Russian government to let that demand go, because they regarded that as the absolute existential threat to the existence of the Russian Federation. And that is why the whole thing started in the first place. And since, this was the demand by Putin on December 17th, 2021, 3 months before the operation started, this was an appeal to NATO and to Biden to give legally binding guarantees for the security demands by Russia. This was utterly disregarded and ignored. Biden made some blah blah answer by saying, yeah, we will start arms negotiations again, but not addressing the so-called core interests in the slightest. NATO made a similar non-answer. And, that is why the whole conflict went into this special military operation, which, as many military experts have said, was never meant to go into a full-fledged war, which you could judge by the size of the Russian army. It was only 190,000 soldiers which were amassed at the Ukrainian border against a Ukrainian army of 400,000. So Harald Kuyat and many other military experts have stated that by that number you could actually deduce that the aim was exactly to liberate the Russian-speaking areas and not more. It was never meant to be a full-fledged war or even to take over Ukraine. So I think that the Russian position is very clear, and they have expressed also that, if there is a ceasefire and Western powers keep pouring weapons into Ukraine during that ceasefire, it just would prolong the war. It would make more, every week 6,000 average people die, Ukrainians, Russians, on the battlefield. And the Ukraine situation is getting pretty close to absolute desperation. They don't have the manpower anymore to keep the front filled up. So I think the Russian position is they want to have a ceasefire, but only after these core interests are fulfilled. That's why they propose a memorandum, which supposedly is now being worked on.
So you're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Helga will also be keynoting the first panel this Saturday morning of the Schiller Institute conference. It is quite an extraordinary panel. I mean, some of the speakers are Dmitry Trenin, a very well Russian expert, Ray McGovern, Scott Ritter, Chas Freeman. I'm probably leaving some out, but I would urge you, register for the conference, get other people online to hear it, and you'll hear much more in depth than we can present in the dialogue today. Now, Helga, I want to come back to this European question, because it's clear that the Europeans are not just sabotaging a peace initiative, but they're pushing for a breakup of Russia. And that would mean war. And that's probably one of the reasons why Merz has emerged as one of the spokesmen for the hardcore war party. You were going to discuss this with Dr. Postol today, but the whole question of the Taurus missiles, where does that stand? Is it really still a likely scenario that Merz would push for providing these medium-range missiles that could strike deep into Russia, that he would push to give those to the Ukrainians?
Well, Merz has stated just a couple of days earlier that Zelensky can absolutely rely on him and Germany when he was asked that question. Then 2 days later, he said, it's now not on the table as an actual problem, but, in any case, we will not make it public anymore if we do that, because, it's not wise to inform your opponent of your plans. So that means, he may have prepared it already. It may have been delivered already. Who knows? Miersch, the new General Secretary of the Social Democracy, however, stated that the Social Democrats still oppose the Taurus delivery because it would make Germany immediately a war party. So in the coalition, there is clearly a different viewpoint. But unfortunately, in the meantime, there was the conclusion of a German-British strategic agreement whereby they decided to construct new long-range missiles which have 4 times the range of the Taurus. The Taurus has 500 kilometers range and can therefore reach Moscow, the government, the Crimea, the Kremlin, which is obviously the ultimate threat. But these new long-range missiles are supposed to have a range of 2,000 kilometers and reach the Urals. Now, for Germany and the British to start building that in this moment is clearly, a sign that they don't intend. In any case, they don't have a peace plan. They don't have a plan how to bring the conflict to an end, how to reestablish normal relations with Russia. You cannot hear a word of this from anybody. So I think the Europeans clearly, if you look what is going on in Europe, it is mind-boggling because, what I said, the taking away the citizenship of German citizens, making them part of the 17 sanctions package against Russia. I talked in the last several days with several people who were all, absolutely flabbergasted how to read that. Because it de facto means these 2 journalists, Thomas Röper and Alina Lipp, who are working from Russia, and from what I can see, they are quite decent journalists. They're very thorough in their source, cultivation and following leads and verifying, checking. They are journalists, in a time where journalism still existed as a profession, which now I'm doubting very much because mostly journalists are propaganda organs for the NATO narrative. But in any case, be it as it may, to put people without legal recourse to take their citizenship away. You have to let that sink in, what that means. It means basically, that anybody who deviates from this narrative is potentially faced with a similar fate. And, in a certain sense, it means they cannot, their bank accounts will be frozen. Therefore, they cannot take a lawyer to have legal recourse. The lawyers, by the sanctions, are forbidden to work with them. So it is de facto impossible to go to a court and try to get justice. It's just an administrative ruling which deprives people of one of their most basic human rights you can imagine, which is the citizenship. And what are they supposed to be now? People without statehood or citizenship? I think this is extremely severe. And I have picked up from a lot of discussions that people are really absolutely getting freaked out about it.
Well, I have one more question on the European situation, which is someone wrote in about the new package of sanctions that the EU just announced. And they say, are they unaware that the past sanctions packages have failed to do anything to stop Russia, but have had a negative effect, a backfire effect on Europe? Secondly, rearmament. Is that really the future of Europe? And then the final point they make is Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, and the whole crew of bureaucrats. Whose interests are they really serving? Who's pulling their strings?
Well, I can already tell you now that this 17th package of sanctions will hurt the European economies much more than Russia, because it deprives Europe, Germany, and other nations definitely from working with Russia, from the access of cheap gas and oil. Von der Leyen even wants to make now a legislation forbidding the reopening of Nord Stream pipelines. This is all self-inflicted disaster. The German economy and the European economy at large are in a free fall. Bankruptcies happen every day. SMEs, small and medium industries, every day 2-3 such firms in Germany declare bankruptcy, and you can count how long that will go. We are in Germany confronted with a potential complete collapse of our model. Just a few years ago, people in the whole world looked at Europe as a very successful model, good social system, not the Anglo-American free market economy, but started with Chancellor Erhard, soziale Marktwirtschaft, social market economy, but the emphasis on social, very well established social system, health system, education system. All of that is going out of the window. And if we don't reverse course very quickly, the whole German model, which is an export-oriented model, it will collapse, because the putting all this money, which is artificially created, you could compare it to the MEFO bills of Hjalmar Schacht. That money is now going where? Well, it's going to a certain extent to the German military-industrial complex, Rheinmetall and others making enormous profits as war profiteers. But, the war drive is not fast enough. So a lot of money goes to other countries producing weapons, to the United States, to the British, to Israel, to all kinds of countries. So money, which will be the debt on future generations, and which is a complete waste, because any investment in military is, from the standpoint of physical economy, thrown out of the window or sunk in the ocean or whatever you want to call it. It does not help the well-being of the population. It is a money-making machine for the speculators and the warmongers. So I can only say that the German situation deserves utmost attention. And there is now a whole bunch of commentators, Jeffrey Sachs, Patrick Lawrence, and a whole bunch of other people are all saying, what is going on with Germany? How can we explain that they cannot change their course when they see that the self-inflicted doom they're bringing about themselves is ruining everything all the generations after the Second World War worked to build up? All of this is being sacrificed right now. And I can only say that the only hope is that the population wakes up and demands a stop to this. So please get active with us, and we will definitely discuss more activities, what needs to be done to increase the public awareness. But we are in an existential crisis right now, and it can only be remedied if enough state citizens, that is you, help together with us to mobilize to stop this.
Well, this brings me to a final question, which goes back to what I raised in the very beginning. Your late husband, raised many years ago the question, do we have the moral fitness to survive? When you have a collection or a coalescence of these kinds of crises, that's the question that's posed. Now, I know he was an optimist. He was tough, but he was an optimist who thought that we would be able to rally that kind of quality of empathy and human creativity to survive. What do you think about that, Helga?
Well, I think that question is definitely something everybody, and that's you who are watching us and listening to us right now, should seriously contemplate about, because the answer is not yet decided. I think the hope is there because the world majority, the countries of the global south who do represent the global majority, they are definitely moving in a completely different direction. if you look at the efforts they are making to create a new economic system based not on geopolitical confrontation, but on a win-win cooperation, on having the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence as the guideline for their foreign policy, I think they're in a completely different mindset and they're peaceful. If you look at the countries of the BRICS and Africa and Asia, Latin America, I mean, there is a completely different mood. People are much more optimistic than in Europe and the United States. But, if this insistence of the Western establishments to cling to their previously privileged position is going to stay until a complete catastrophe is arrived at, that remains to be seen. And, it's very dangerous. And I can only say, in a moment like that, you have to mobilize the best inside yourself. You have to think about, what is my life worth? Why am I here? What is the purpose of the human species? Is the human species something different than animals? I can tell you, no animal, not a bear, not a lion, not a snake, no other so-called nasty animal, would ever do what some people who have given up their humanity is capable of doing. Because they only kill when they are hungry, and when they're, when their hunger is gone, they stop. But what is going on this planet right now for the lust of greed and profit and privileges goes beyond what any animal would ever do. So you have to ask yourself in a moment like that, where can I find the resources in my best inner soul to stand up against the evil around me? And that is why you should look at such people as Friedrich Schiller, as Ludwig van Beethoven, and Confucius, and many of the other great thinkers, because they have dealt with the questions, on a very advanced level. And naturally, my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, who is being praised now by more and more people who say he was so absolutely right. He predicted all of this, what is coming. And if you look at some of his older speeches, video or written articles, it is amazing. Many of them are so absolutely actual as if they would have been written today. So that will be also an aspect of our coming conference. And I think there is still time to reflect on all of that and, basically say we are in a situation where we definitely have to take mankind first, not one country first, but mankind first. And then you have to somehow put the interest of your own country in affinity with that larger interest of humanity as a whole. And then everything will fall in its place and can be worked out. But become active. I think indifference is the worst sin right now.
So get off your rear ends and join us this weekend as we mobilize to bend the arc of history towards justice. I'll be keynoting the 3rd panel on the OASIS plan and the LaRouche plan for 1 billion jobs. Helga will be keynoting the 1st panel. So Helga, we'll see you then.
Yes, till Saturday.